past week, we worked on Standard 10.3i. Standard 10.3i is all about how events happen in a story, what order they happen in. And it's a really important standard, mostly because it builds us to Standard 10.2, where we're going to be able to talk about theme. To be able to talk about theme, what we have to be able to do is think about the most important things in a story. And the way we can tell what's most important is by looking at what they lead to. Trying to look at an entire text and find where those important moments are, where things happen that lead to more things, and how events in the story impact the people in the story. That's what the standard is all about. All right, so we were doing this work using the text Macbeth, and I'm going to focus on Macbeth during this recap because I think it'll be easiest to do that CER that I have for your evidence using the story of Macbeth. It's really hard to get the context for your entire book unless you've finished your book. And so we're going to start off by talking about Macbeth. Now, the scene that we focused on as a class in Macbeth is a very early in the film, and it's the scene where the witches prophesy to Macbeth that he will become the king. Okay? So before this, Macbeth is this war hero, right? He is the guy the king likes. He totally war for them. He's a little bit violent because he definitely cut a guy in half. But, overall a decent guy. Then he meets the witches. And the important piece of this standard is that you have to think about what changed for him when those told him, when they predicted that he was going to be the whole king of Scotland. How did his attitude towards things change after that moment? Once you know how that scene impacts Macbeth, you can play. So I'm going to give you a brief recap of the play right now, and hopefully along with the comic that I have available for you in class, this will enable you to do this final piece of writing, which is what I'm grading for the standard for this past week. We have Macbeth. He goes to these witches, and they're like, hey, you're great. He starts thinking, oh, I could be the king. And then his wife is like, oh no, you're gonna be the king, sir. So here's what we do. And she comes up with a plan to kill the king when he visits their castle. And at first he's a nice guy. Why would I do that? That's awful. I'm not a bad person. And then she's like, what are you? Some kind of wimp? What are you gonna do? You're not even man enough to murder this guy? You want to be king, but you're not willing to do the work for it. So he's convinced, and together they kill the king. They toy with it at first, because the king's sons are like, ooh, I'm in danger. They run away, which makes them look super guilty, and it looks like they're the ones who killed the king. Especially since Macbeth immediately guards and claims that they're the ones who actually slit the king's throat. Of course, his wife actually poisoned them earlier. So, Macbeth is king, and everything's looking great, right? So, Macbeth has just murdered the king, and he goes, well, I guess I got away with it. I stabbed these two guys. I said they did it, and the king's sons ran away, so it looks like they hired them to do it. Guess I'm safe. Except for Banquo, his friend who was with him when they heard that prophecy together. He's making some connections. He's like, hold up. That's really suspicious timing, considering that Macbeth just got the idea that he might be able to be king. But Macbeth is made king, and when Banquo says some stuff and Macbeth gets suspicious, he murders Banquo too. So now we have Macbeth with a kill count at 4. And then he gets more prophecies from the witches, and the witches tell him to be brave and strong of heart. And they tell him that if you beware Macbeth, no man born of woman can kill you, and you'll be safe until the trees come marching. And so he's like, cool, I'm gravy. The trees are never going to be uprooted. Macduff, whatever, I'll avoid him, but no one can kill me? That sounds great. So then Macduff runs away because he's like, oh dear, things are looking suspicious. And also Macbeth is a horrible king. Maybe I should go talk to the king's actual sons and find out if they really did kill him. Turns out they didn't. Now, while Macduff is gone, Well, Macbeth has decided that when he makes a thought, he's going to act on that thought because that's what strong, manly men do. So he kills Macduff's entire family, including his wife and all of his children, which makes Macduff pretty darn upset. An important piece here is that when Macduff gets this news, he gets really emotional, and the king's son who's with him is like, dude, man up, it's okay, turn this into rage, let's go get revenge. And he's like, well, I have to feel my feelings too. So it's a really interesting difference between Macbeth and Macduff and how they react to challenges to their manliness. So finally then, as we end here, Macduff and the king's son come marching in, and they decide to use those very same trees to hide their march in. Then there's a whole showdown between Macduff and Macbeth. And Macbeth is like, haha, no one born of woman can kill me. And Macduff's like, but I was a C-section, so Macduff kills Macbeth in the end. So now that we've gone through the entire summary of the play, what you need to do for this standard is to be able to write about how the prophecy at the beginning, why do you think Shakespeare decided to start this with a prophecy, right? He could have started the play anywhere. He chose to put the prophecy in the beginning, and the witches are the first ones who have any lines in the play. And also, he told Macbeth the prophecy. He structured the play so that Macbeth found out that the witches were calling him king before he found out that he really was the Thane of Cawdor, which is another thing they predicted. So what effect did that have? Why did Shakespeare put things in that order? So what you need to do is write me a paragraph, okay? Tell me what happened in Macbeth. Tell me a little bit about what happened in order. So tell me that first it was the prophecy and then what happened. How did that prophecy cause the later things to start happening? Then you've got to tell me, why do you think Shakespeare put that prophecy up front? Was it because he wanted to give Macbeth a reason to want to be king? Couldn't he have just made Macbeth really greedy? Was it because he wanted the witches knowing fate to create some kind of tension with the audience? You tell me, why do you think Shakespeare decided to start with those witches and to put them in again? Why did he frame everything with the witches? And finally, tell me, do you think he did a good job? Judge Shakespeare. Do you think he could have done something more effective, or did it really work well the way he used that prophecy with the witches? Did it make you more interested when you weren't sure if it was going to come true or not? Think about it, and then write me a paragraph answering those three things. You can always use your checklist to make sure that you have each of the things I need to give you full credit for this standard. And if you finished a book and you really understand the impact of the scene in your book that you've been reading, you are absolutely welcome to try to prove to me the standard using your checklist and that book that you really like.